Welcome in here to HGC North America. We've got some movers and shakers on display today with several of our top teams that will be presented later today. My name is Jay Howe. Joining me is Dreadnought. And Dreadnought, we've got some action-packed Sunday here. I know there's another sport out there that a lot of people like, but this is where the real action is.
The real action is very much going to be here, even more so when looking towards North America. And spoiler alert for anybody who didn't keep track of this weekend, we have debatably possibly the decider match of who really is here in part number 2, the top of North America, to decide here today, and also some insight, or kind of being able to get the perspective here towards Tempo Storm since their recent results, and again, Simplicity as well.
Well, let's look at the standings so we can break this down for you guys at home, because earlier this weekend, Octalysis, they took down that of Tempo Storm. They'll try their hand today against Heroes Hearth, the top 2 teams for them. Simplicity and Tempo Storm will be the 2 teams we'll focus on first, Dreadnought. Simplicity, after yesterday's performance from LFM, now that becomes much more narrow. We can get into that later, but the top 3 out of the 4 teams will be on display today.
It's going to be exciting there to be able to watch that here, especially because considering some of the trade-offs that we've gotten with the specific drafting adjustments from Octalysis. But as we already saw here in Europe, we saw the Monkeys try and take on Team Dignitas, and Dignitas just, they did what they did here. They win the video game very well, very swift with that. And then as we moved on, Fnatic took on Method, able to get the victory there, 3-1. The race for the top representatives of Europe here at HGC is very, very tense.
And then later tonight, we'll have Heroes Hearth versus Octalysis. That is a match you do not want to miss. Opening up the show today is that of Simplicity versus Tempo Storm. A Tempo Storm team that took down Heroes Hearth just previously in the last few weeks. So they took down the top team, but then Octalysis turned right around and beat Tempo Storm. So there is some decisions on who's really the best. As I said already, Octalysis will have their chance against Heroes Hearth later, but for Simplicity, Dreadnought, it's very important for them after LFM's win yesterday, a decisive win over Endemic, who had unfortunate circumstances of their own. That race for that 6th seed to get into playoffs versus the number 7 seed for the Crucible, very important for Simplicity to start picking up wins, hopefully in the series column, but even in the game column.
Yeah, I think the map score is the biggest thing to be looking at for Simplicity, because the race with them and LFM, how tense that is going to be. That pretty much Simplicity, the way to approach this is if they're against a opponent that maybe you would consider out of the caliber for them to take on. I think a lot of people at home would look at Tempo Storm and say that's too big of a gap, but those maps are very much going to matter as we move further on through North America.
Yeah, we're going to take a look at that in a moment. First, we're going to hear from Glaurung and K1 Pro on their thoughts on this matchup for today.
I think Simplicity, anytime you put them against the wall, you see a fight. And I'd like to say at their prime, they could pick and choose a fight with anyone and beat them. But now, I think times have changed a little bit. They might be struggling with their current team atmosphere and roster, but there's still a bunch of scary players if you put them into a corner. I'd say we feel pretty confident going into our match versus Simplicity, but we have to show up and provide good results.
Going up against Tempo Storm's gonna be a pretty hard match. Our confidence levels versus Tempo aren't that high because they have 5 really strong players. But looking at Vin, he might be able to punish his hero pool because he hasn't been playing that many different heroes in the HGC yet. We might look to focus on him. I think it'll come down to getting what heroes we want in the draft. And as long as we get our comfort heroes, which we've been practicing, we should be able to get the team fights we're looking for.
Dreadnought, K1 Pro mentioned maybe targeting the hero pool of Tempo Storm, and I want to talk about that because we saw the Chromie pick in that highlight package. It was kind of the anti-Sergeant Hammer, but even after the Chromie rework, we saw a significant drop-off, slight buffs. It just doesn't seem like the impact is there. So Tempo Storm still seems to be trying to figure out what their meta is. They have strong picks, things that look good at times, but then there's other drafts it seems like they don't necessarily have the advantages we're used to.
And I think that comes down to some of the adjustments that they have had as a team when looking at the international perspective with, Swoy coming in on coaching. We've heard what that has had as an impact for them as a roster within the Western Clash. It has been interesting interesting to try and find whatever that meta is. And I do think it is interesting to see if Simplicity can find ways to get that upper hand, because I look at the Chromie pick, for instance, and I don't know if I look at that and go, that's Vin hero pool, even though I think that is something that you could try and argue as a weak point for Tempo Storm. I think that's more of them. Again, what is the objective strengths? Were the Chromie nerfs too much? And, you know, based on that game specifically, it did look like it was too much.
Well, that was on Infernal Shrines, the map that we did see, but it's time to check out what our heroes are going to be today. Our Battleground pool, excuse me. We'll take a look at that here, as it will be Tomb of the Spider Queen, picked up by Simplicity, a map they've been favoring a lot lately, so no surprise there. The ban on Brax's holdout, the normal for Simplicity, Tempo Storm, ridding of Sky Temple.
I always find it interesting when we have the roster of Simplicity comfortable with prioritizing Battlegrounds with heavy amounts of wave clear. It hasn't been the go-to strength. You even heard it in the interview there from Glaurung that they're rostered that when their backs are against the wall, they can team fight with anybody. Notice how that wasn't macro with anybody. It was very much about how they can skirmish here. And so with Tomb of the Spider Queen, the pickup there, it just seems interesting that they keep going to those Battlegrounds that you know you have to get the wave clear and the macro game on point.
We know that Tempo Storm loves Deckard Cain. June makes so many plays on that, but the contention over a Deckard or a Yrel, something that Zuna, it fits his playstyle to get into the back line, make things dirty, be on a hero that you can live longer on, and just create that chaos that they know they can use to isolate. So I'm really curious on the first part of this draft on who's targeting what, because we know on the side of Simplicity, they don't necessarily have the same type of priority on Deckard. They like to potentially go into the white main, Tiger JK, we know, potentially on the Kharazim. So there is some counterplay in the early parts of the draft that if one team is looking to focus on the hero pool of another, I would almost say you could play around that, but I am curious on how much Vin focus they think they can get on the side of Simplicity.
If I'm Simplicity, I think the bigger element in this draft, rather than maybe looking towards Vin as a weaker point, I'd be looking at what are the biggest elements that I can rely on that we look at our best form. And for me, that is if K1 Pro finds himself on any kind of initiator, a damage dealer like the Maevs, like the Jaina used to be, not so much under this current meta, but something that can get that initiation for him and the team, because it does feel like when he's the one setting up the ganks within the laning rotations, that is when Simplicity really does feel, you know, maybe back to old roots.
One of the things that we heard from Prismat during the Octalysis interview prior to the Tempo series was to try and focus on Glaurung and maybe see if he oversteps a little. It feels like the same could be said about both the solo laners on either side, because between Glaurung and between Zuna, they're probably the two most notoriously aggressive solo laners we've had in almost all of HGC.
But I will say, when it comes to the individual lane and getting the 1-versus-1 outplay, I think Glaurung comes out on top of that matchup. So I think if anybody looks at this as more concerning, right, if you look at it as the weakest link is going to be the breaking point of that chain, then I look at that and go, Simplicity, this is your responsibility to find an answer and solution to this in-game, even though I agree that it could be an element to focus on and try and pick on.
If that Yrel's picked up, which we'll find out soon, we have seen Glaurung start to go more into the Mouthdale route. So we'll keep an eye on that as we go forward. Simplicity, the Maiev, taking that away. That's more of a fan hero, but obviously a very dominant hero right now in our current meta and very difficult to deal with in the laning situation. Diablo banned out, which leads me to believe Simplicity might make an early play for the Murden and deny that from Cattle.
Well, with the ban out high on the Warrior choke there with the Murden and the ban phase for Tempo Storm, that's not going to be an option, but it surely has to be some form of a high priority into the Warriors. It's just with the double Warrior already taken off with the meta picks being removed. What is the go-to? Where's the Johanna value come in? Is that in the first pick? Tempo Storm wasted no time. Just goes, nope, we're going to take that up for ourselves. But if you're Simplicity and you're willing to get this kind of call out, will you first pick Johanna? Your answer should be very, very usually quick and dominant here. So already that kind of hesitation makes me wonder if that was a call out and they weren't sure if Tempo answered what they were going to respond with.
Yeah. With that Murd and ban, I guess the focus I should have said, with Garrosh.
Yeah.
Now that's been that second tier that we see for King Caffeine. When all others aren't available, when the Murden's not available, when the Diablo's not available, he'd played Johanna at times in the past, but since we've come back from the Clash, it's been more on the focus of a Garrosh, of a Muradin. So for Tempo Storm, if we go 3 Warriors deep on this, I wouldn't be surprised in the bans.
And already giving them the wave clear advantage, even more so with the lock-in and the Blaze for the off lane, and there's the Sergeant Hammer, a lot of laning control both in the off lane here and within the 4-man itself for Tempo Storm. I feel like they've got to be very happy with what they have happening within the first half of this draft. I feel like there's a lot of responsibility for some kind of answer here from Simplicity. But with the Johanna pickup and the choke already being so heavy in the Warriors, I feel like that is going to be devastating. Garrosh, in that kind of situation, is not going to be able to move up into this hammer very well. So much so, J-How, that I want to see something other than a Garrosh even. I don't want to say ETC, but probably a new Barak, something of that.
A new Barak seems pretty decent, and I start to think of heroes that maybe if we don't focus on the Warrior side of things, and I go back just a few weeks to Eastern Clash and we started to hear the rumblings of potential Sergeant Hammer counters. A hero that we saw, not necessarily against Sergeant Hammer, but a hero that came out on this battleground multiple times is a Nazebo.
Yeah.
And getting spiders onto a Sergeant Hammer is a fairly easy task, and that was kind of the realm of which we first heard about Nazebo making his way back into the meta. It is a possibility, I think, when we look at the map and the battleground here of Tomb of the Spider Queen.
I agree with you there. Could be one of those answers, but with the Johanna and Blaze, it's not like they don't have targets that are pretty good into the Nazebo with enough wave clear in other areas as well. We're going to still get the Li Ming answer here, carrying out through North America is the modern response, it feels like, to the Sergeant Hammer, and then a Hanzo pickup for Simplicity.
A K1 Pro Li Ming, always threatening. This is a very different battleground for Li Ming. Some of the rotations that you'll find will be different to find, I think, the same types of angles, because there's so much goaltending involved in this. But Hanzo, we know Hosty does really well on that Hanzo. We'll get a Rhaegar and a Junkrat. So the Junkrat does add even more wave clear. But in terms of the executioner side, Rhaegar almost seems like the best instant, like, oh, they're soft enough, I think I can go in and confirm the kill hero that we have in this game.
Yeah, and there are health bars low enough on Simplicity's composition between the Li Ming and Hanzo that could be a realistic thing coming to light throughout this game. They have enough individual sustain, though, and that the skill shot dependency, especially after that Stitches pickup in the last part of the draft here for Simplicity, it feels like it puts it into that really tough situation. When we were talking about the Warrior chokes and avoiding going into the Garrosh, I said the Anub Barak, but now seeing the Stitches picked up, I like that way more, even than the Anub. I feel like it fits the role very well, helps with the wave clear and control over the laning situation. Always has the trade-off of can you hit the hook, but that's the crux of Stitches, if you will.
It seems when we see this style of composition, though, I think there will be a lot of responsibility on the Yrel. The halfway point. Johanna can goaltend very, very well, as can Blaze. So getting to those points is going to be difficult finding turn-ins.
Yeah.
And if you're not hitting those hooks and you're not putting enough pressure and threat on the enemy team, it feels that I've seen so many times that halfway point is so crucial in that mid lane that Johanna can just walk you down because you can't really do anything to her. You can't bully her out with this composition.
Yep.
And I think it's going to be Yrel rotations. The problem is those are so hard to get unless you force them early. I'm really worried for Simplicity if they're not landing early in this game, that they might just give up those turn-ins, those small turn-ins that we know Tempo Storm gets so well.
I agree with you. I mean, there are definite concerns here when looking at the composition of Simplicity. A lot of it for me is just going to be not only if they get the hooks, but scatter arrow setup with Li Ming reset somewhere. But their default kits have to find ways to get kills within the laning setup here. In the blue, it is going to be Simplicity looking for those kills, where we got Hosty on the Li Ming. K1 Pro gonna rep the Hanzo. Stitches played by King Caffeine, Tiger JK on Deckard, and Zuna on Yrel.
For Tempo Storm in red, they'll be on the right here, and it's going to be Glaurung. He'll be on the Blaze in that solo. Caterpillar on the Johanna. That Warrior choke making that very intriguing. Vin, he'll be on Junkrat. Fan on the Sergeant Hammer. And June on Rhaegar.
Interesting thing to point out here. No mobility at 1 for June on the Rhaegar. Normally into his Stitches, you oftentimes will see that talent picked up just to ensure that you are never going to be the hook target. You're still pretty good at not being the hook target, just makes it a little less forgiving.
King Caffeine going into the slam build, making sure to have that extra damage that might be needed. Zuna finds his way into the backline, but not by his own doing, as we see the concussion mine sending him back into the side of Tempo Storm as things neutralize. The rotations begin.
Zuna was a little bit slow to make his way down to bottom, so much so that Glaurung has actually been trying to zone off of that bottom lane, some experience. Zuna has made his way back, but as you can see, Glaurung finding his way to get the upper hand in that lane for now.
Almost had to do a double take here. Hosty not on Hanzo.
Yeah.
And K1 not on Li Ming. Two of after the early part of this year, you could argue was Hosty's new most iconic hero once we got past the old days of a Falstad, Tassadar, Abathur, you know, those days, Medivh.
Yeah.
And K1 Pro historically has been one of the better Li Ming, so this is a very surprising change-up for me for the roles.
Oh, I agree with you. It is interesting to see that. You know, so much so that in the draft we're like, there we go, that's K1 Pro's Li Ming, and then did not see that when it comes to the game itself. We'll see how that ends up working out here for Simplicity. Nice concussion mine, gonna send Kath back into a tough spot. Scroll of Ceiling comes out, will end up stopping the advance for a moment as it gets out that Iron Skin. Hook back here onto Vin though. Not gonna cause too much there. One thing I did want to point out here is that Tempo Storm has gone with a very creative here kind of opening to Tomb of the Spider Queen with the early Knight rotation. Early Knights aren't that crazy as Concussion Mine knocking King Cat Bean. All the body blocks are going to be there for Tempo Storm as they get the first blood on Simplicity. But as I was saying, just set it through that Night Camp. That is possible due to the Rhaegar Hammer. That was the only 2 individuals they sent back to do that. No other support can start an early camp like that, get as much AoE damage due to Lightning Shield. Such a cool ability there.
The thing I like most about it is that they recognize that maybe the early one is the best one. Li Ming, there's the natural spell armor from that Knight. And Hanzo, his wave clear is much better at level 4. We expect the explosive arrow as the usual. And so if you can get that pre-level 4, you have a much better chance of getting in to get some of that damage as the explosive arrow is picked up. And as we've seen lately, Dreadnought, the Triumvirate picked up for Li Ming to try and counter the hammer.
I think the interesting question towards Li Ming build in this game is going to be the level 7, though. The Calamity over the Seeker. We'll talk about that in a minute. Is Zuna going to get caught out for a moment? Hammer goes down, but he walks into the trap. Concussion Mine there. Not even needing the knockback. I think that might have been enough for the final kill. Not a statement we say too often there.
It was kind of fun to watch. You don't see that interaction. It literally looked like an explosion in his face.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I'm done.
Ended up getting the pickup there. Now Tempo Storm furthering the control over this early game laning situation. But what I was going to say is towards that Li Ming 7 is just when you have a Stitches comp, the one-shot, one-kill Stitches hook, it's not that you can't Seeker reliably get that damage onto the hook target, but you need to be pixel perfect with the timing and everything of the like. The synergy demanded is very, very high versus Calamity. Reliable, easy, you can make that happen all day. And so I can't help but feel like I would like to see the Calamity, but then we've seen Seeker as the answer to Hammer, so.
See if it continues to be. I do like that Simplicity has managed to get some early turn-ins. It's something we've seen teams struggle with against Tempo Storm. Tempo Storm finding another advantage through that siege camp, and the bot Dreadnought have managed to siege up and take down that tower. And while we oftentimes bring up the lack of experience in that tower, what this does do is empower a potential early turn-in on Webweaver's Dread.
Yeah, and having pressure over bottom will allows you to make more free of a rotation to mid and then get the rotation down to bottom after you take the middle front wall afterwards. It's really just kind of prepping what is the most advantageous rotations for the early Dragonite phase, or excuse me, Webweaver phase. Been trying to get the turn in there, but Zuna and Hosi not letting that go over easy here. As you said, though, I do agree with you. The Simplicity's ability to get some of those kind of micro turn-ins here is something we don't often see in North American Tomb of the Spider Queen. I think it's really going to help them here.
Seeker the pickup. So we'll see how effective that can be and whether that does have an impact on a potential missed combo as Zuna is trying to get away. Did go Divine Steed. We saw the small mount up there for a moment. Buys enough space, he should be fine to walk away. But man, K1 Pro trying to make the plays there as he agility's over, unable to find the angle.
I feel like that had to have been a big hook play. The body block's coming in there from Tiger JK, enough to get the Webweaver phase and the Scroll of Ceiling, forcing June out of position for a moment. Cap not questioning if he's going to hook that one out. First Webweaver phase now after that blocking over to Simplicity, but don't have as good of siege as you may say for Tempo Storm, so it's important that they find a way to get a kill during this downtime.
Would you say that there might also be some importance in the factor of it keeps Tempo Storm from getting that early turn-in to potentially get those early forts that we've seen after that small damage? To deny the snowball potential, which we've seen take place on this?
I think that is definitely a fair argument, and it's like, hey, we're limiting our opponent's advantages as well, and compositionally speaking, because we are behind in the wave clear, that stopping this is going to be bettering us. But I do say that if that was the core thought process behind that,
it should just be a bonus, not an actual
the cherry
initiative.
on top, not the, hey, look at this, like we can deny that pressure through the bottom lane. Simplicity instead responding with pressure towards that bottom lane here, as it is the final Webweaver to stand. Tempo, when the Webweaver phase kind of declines, will be sitting dead even. Fan, I'm surprised Cap didn't go for the hook over that wall once he sieged up. I thought for sure that would have been just an easy hook combo. I was about to say Fan needs to be very careful, but Cap, no interest shown, at least there.
We saw on Tomb yesterday or Friday where there was a team that was able to get a fort down in the early part, and it allowed for that 13 to 11 where it's like, okay, this is bad.
Yeah.
Except they ended up getting a few kills and snowballed it from there, and that's always the picture that we try and paint on how effective an early fort can be on Tomb of the Spider Queen now, especially for teams that once they get the lead dread, they don't let up, and Tempo Storm is a team that knows how to do that.
Yeah, and Tempo actually now, as they got their Web Weaver phase, the downtime of Simplicity getting the Night Camp due to the heroics that Tempo Storm has, it makes sense that they would play that passive. But Tempo has another Web Weaver phase immediately after this. So based on that early game structure and having the wave clear advantage, if Tempo gets a lot of structures with this, they're going to probably have another Web Weaver phase behind it. King Caffeine needs to be a hook monster here as you see him sharking around there. Every 16 seconds, he is a threat. First hook, Iron Skin War. We'll wait that one out until the 36-second mark and see if he can find another.
There's a staggered part there. Is King Caffeine going to use the Putrid Vial for what seems mostly like wave clear here as the Web Weaver moves in? But without the cooldown reduction on the Iron Skin, the hook 16 seconds, Iron Skin at 20-second mark, there is some overlap time there, but very good use by Cattle recognizing that positioning. The fort should fall momentarily, but it's a matter of keeping the other ones up. Fan already used his armor. Has to walk away. Iron Skin down. See if he looks for the hook behind it.
It is available. Hook comes out.
Ooh.
Look at that. War and the pre-cleanse sent out there by June. Good job from Tempo Storm using the teamwork to make sure they don't end up losing anything there. K1 Pro going to get caught out. Dragon's Arrow, and look, wow, a lot of cooldowns there after Galarang had already shown that he didn't have as much interest in that initiation as he would like.
Not able to make that rotation down, getting 2 forts, and you can see the experience differential now because of that. So Tempo Storm getting that advantage in Dreadnought, as you said. They also have enough gems for another turn, and Simplicity does too. But with the lane control, at least momentarily, gives a small window for Tempo Storm to try and get some turn-ins, and King Caffeine recognizes just that. But good body blocking. But they did manage to get the interrupt at the last moment.
Hook comes over the wall, interrupt the jet propulsion, but we'll be back up. Durrell trying to turn in on the top lane, but Junkrat's able to get the interrupt there.
Well, that lane control now, Dreadnought, with that siege camp picked up, when Simplicity inevitably has to respond to that, that should be an opportunity for Tempo Storm to dictate the pacing or take an advantageous fight.
It even gets more dire when you consider that that's going to be just about the 13 breaking point too. If one initiation happens to where they get the kill, it would put them over that breaking point and be able to further the advantage. That's enough gems for a Web Weaver phase. But this is Tempo Storm willing to rotate out from bottom.
Ooh, Stitches.
Based on that 13 though.
Stitches got that turn in.
Yeah, and I think that's Tempo almost forfeiting it to a certain
It's fine,
extent.
because we'll have the 13 for defense, right?
Yeah. Giants on bottom, you know somebody has to back out and deal with that. This Web Weaver is going to descend pretty heavily on the side of Simplicity's side of the battleground, as you see that. Poor little spider. Long trek over. Middle and top are the only ones effective, but because middle is so far back, that's the easiest defense for Tempo. So Tempo is clearing the highest risk one possible earliest, getting as much damage for free onto this, then can make the rotation to mid, and we talked about how easy it is to neglect bottom for Tempo.
Whenever I see that self-cleanse on a Sergeant Hammer, I just look at the mini-map. If a Hanzo's somewhere far away, looking to see if he's going to rip that Dragon Arrow. No Dragon Arrow there. Of course, you want to be in position to try and follow up. Simplicity being aggressive. They get the hook in on Glaurung. That forces the bunker out. The Riptire in response. That gets knocked back. Hosty does rip that Dragon Arrow, but there's not much behind it.
Yeah, not much behind it. Glaurung goes in with the jet propulsion. Condemned back onto Zuna as well. Fan wailing away there. The Stitches hook up just now off of cooldown. Not going to be pulled yet. You see Cap waiting. Minion Wave trying to get rid of that. Hook comes out onto Fan.
Oh.
But there's an interaction we need to talk about, and it just happened there. When there's not enough distance for the model of the target for the Stitches hook to go over any wall. It can be somebody else blocking it, a structure or anything of the like. So that was half the structure, half Stitch's body, half Urel's body. Blocked it, and Hammer falls on the other side of the railing.
They both got pretty big bodies.
Yeah. They're both tanks, you know? It's just how it works. Hooks lands on a Cattle, has Iron Skin.
There's a combination of Seeker that did land. Iron Skin able to walk away for Cattle is a main concern. but at least the accuracy is there. And Hosty is feeling so strong about this, trying to confirm those kills. Another glass cannon build to go behind this. If you're not willing to commit to Calamity, you can stay back and hope to get that long-range poke to survive.
I think it's fair to say that every time we see Seeker, we're going to see the glass cannon as the future response here for North America. An attempt to turn in down below for Urel. Cattle questioning if he wants to try and cut that off. His tempo now is going to give Vin 55 gems. Hook comes out onto June, not enough to get a kill. Jet propulsion out from Glaurong, excuse me. This is Webweaver phase here now for Tempo.
The Putrid Bile, they got the hook in on the June. I'm not sure where the communication came in there. Maybe there was a follow-up missing. But that, not the longest cooldown, but we saw it used last time to defend against the Webweavers, get some damage out. Hook finding nothing but air. But the Webweavers spawning much further forward than they did last time, and that bottom lane will always be a very interesting point of contention in the way that these teams use that. Dreadnought, I know, and this is something you bring up, it's always important to, that rotation from mid-bot that you're so fond of.
Yeah, it's just really fast compared to about every other lane on this battleground. The only other way you can make the rotation from top to mid is through that kind of funnel that you see right there, and it's not nearly as offensive or on the side of battleground of simplicity as from mid-bot. Mid has been dealt with, bottom, not quite the same case.
There they are.
Here's the rotation over, and that is why it is such a concern.
Yeah. It's always fun because you bring it up, but very rarely do we get to see it work so flawlessly here as Tempo Storm able to make their way in. Putrid Bile is enough to help defend, but getting the lead beyond just, hey, you know, a keep would be nice, a kill would be nice, but you look at the totality of it all. Another nice cleanse there by June, but the totality of it all, Dread, the mid wall down, bottom wall down, and you look up, that's a 2-level lead just off what you talked about.
Yeah, just off of that rotation there from them. And another thing to consider based on that rotation, Jay-How, is, you know, let's say that you could argue, well, why is that even that much safer beyond that point? Like, what if I pressure out and I try and stop that choke and that transition if I'm on the side of simplicity? The answer is because then Tempo Storm can still push in through mid, and as long as you're rid of the sidewalls, the rotation past the keep front wall, it's just as short. It's actually maybe even faster than through the Knights, and it's, again, not anywhere near the same case when looking at that rotation from top to mid.
A tough defense here. With the amount of pressure the last Webweaver's gotten with this already down, the talent tier advantage is still here. Another Webweavers, and they will spawn on the doorstep of the keeps here. Hook going to miss. Level 16 almost here. Putrid Bile up again here for Stitches, if he wants to use that as a defensive tool. Oh, the Blessed Shield. There's going to be the combo. And nothing to buy there.
Yeah, and look at that. They are not done. Tempo Storm find themselves another kill. Now the focus is going to go onto the keep, but with 30 seconds having 2 members dead, Tempo Storm may waste no time. Jet Propulsion lands on a K1 Pro. Natural Agility will be available there as he uses it on the keep. Zuna goes in as it feels like this is the last stand for simplicity. The Ardent Defender there. Concussion Mine out by Vin puts Zuna into a bad spot. Interrupt onto the leap from Condemn. And now Tempo looks to the core.
Hanzo, no Dragon Arrows. It was used. The shields have fallen. Fan and team on that Sergeant Hammer, starting to take down the core. 80% and falling. Tempo Storm behind these back-to-back-to-back turn-ins. Look to close out game number 1. They did so in very impressive fashion. A slower start, good turn-in by Simplicity in the early going, but the pressure mounted here by Tempo Storm. And Dreadnought, that last point that you made about that mid-bot rotation, I hear you make it all the time. We got to see it fully unfold here for Tempo Storm. Tempo Storm recognizing their macro win conditions. They did that. They got the lead, 2-level lead. That's almost textbook.
Yeah, it was very clean play from Tempo Storm. And as we had pointed out even, it felt like their game plan was to wait to the later stages and stack those Webweaver phases afterwards. They did that very cleanly. You saw the only Webweaver phase that was really given up, if you will, was during a calculated spike at the 12 to 13 time frame that was enabled through the macro pressure of the Giants through bottom. Tempo Storm had almost 0 moments where it was not, okay, this is going exactly as planned.
I said back-to-back-to-back. I guess it was we had one, we gave up one, but then back-to-back after that. And it was enough to close it out. Tempo Storm, they're so strong. They had the Sergeant Hammer counter. It's a hero that we know Simplicity that likes to play, but the way the draft unfolded, the draft rotations, it seemed like Tempo Storm got a lot of what they wanted. The focus on the Warrior bands, that Stitches, he only has so many engagements. You were watching the cooldowns throughout that. It's Hook, and then it's 16-second downtime of, well, we'll wait again, and if you're not landing them, mind you, there were 2 excellent pre-cleanses and even an iron skin used there, so Tempo Storm recognized that. And when you look at a full minute of cooldowns, essentially, when the rotations and the next opportunity you have, that's a 10th, a 15th of your opportunities that you'll have throughout the entire game. So very well played and very well recognized by Tempo Storm.
Yeah, and those 2 pre-cleanses you were talking about onto the Stitches hook, one thing to keep in mind that we got to see there was one was intentionally blocked by Glorong with the pre-cleanse onto him. That one was pretty neat, but the second one on bottom was the one that was on the fly. At that moment, that's the highest chance of a Stitches hook is on retreat. That's where you almost always are going to be looking for it, but sticking at the same distance of your team to make sure you always get that, it was actually really clever and comms-wise. I feel like that was the most impressive thing from Tempo Storm. They aren't, you know, again, the cutting edge kind of, and we haven't ever seen a pre-cleanse on a hook, but it was having June constantly around there positionally to get that. That was pretty cool.
I think when I just imagine, we've always had the pleasure, especially at Midseason Brawl, where we kind of get to see and hear the players behind the scenes and the way they communicate with each other. I can just imagine that they're just sitting there and it's like going for a walk. Like for them, it's easy. And that's my favorite part about Tempo Storm is in those situations, I just hear Cattle, he's like, I got iron skin. And he just walks away, right? And that's what I think of when I think of Tempo Storm. The way that they're able to execute, that's the reason why they've been at the top for so long.
Yeah, it does take, you know, all those hundreds of hours that these guys end up building within, you know, it's probably thousands depending on the player and the amount of time and that they've been a part of the HGC. But yeah, that is that time and effort through the scrims where it gets to the point where it actually is genuinely second nature. Like you're like, all right, there's the insert, the opener of this team fight. We've done this 1,000 times. I've got the curse bullet follow-up. Somebody make sure you kill the guy.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if they can do it again. It's time for Battleground number 2, and we're going to check out Will Simplicity. They like first pick, but they did not ban Dragonshire, a map that we know Tempo Storm is so dominant on